Hello everyone, this is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This week we're going to be talking about the 7 subplanes of the astral plane. But first I want to talk about a related topic. On Reddit recently, I saw that someone was advertising $100 if an astral projector could go and see what was on his table and then report back. I responded to that offer and wrote a short article about it. I think there's a profound misunderstanding of exactly what astral projection is. Now, recently I wrote an article and also did a video about the differences between astral projection and remote viewing. And I hope you all had a chance to catch that. If you recall, remote viewing is when you are conscious, perhaps in a light meditative state, and you are sending a portion of your consciousness to somewhere else on the physical plane. You are observing what you see there, then you are returning with that information. You may remember that I discussed an experiment that I did when I was about 12 with my sister in remote viewing. I sent her upstairs with a tablet with instructions to draw whatever she felt like drawing. She drew a stick figure. In about 10 minutes, she came downstairs, and I revealed to her the drawing that I had made, which was an inverted stick figure. So what I did is I was able to observe what was happening in the present, in the physical, in this remote viewing experience. However, as we know, members of Astral Club, that astral projection does not take place in the physical. You are not some ghostly entity wandering about the physical. Your astral body is in the astral, one of the subplanes of the astral. And I did another experiment, which you might find interesting, about 30 years ago with my brother. And he said he was going to place something in his downstairs closet and that I should astral project and tell him what it was. Well, I managed to do that. And when I reported back to him that I saw an old Russian samovar, which is a Russian tea maker, he laughed like only a younger brother can laugh at my failure, because that was not at all the object that he had placed in that downstairs closet. Well, the experiment ended inconclusively, I guess you could say. However, a few months later, he found himself speaking with the gentleman who had sold him his house about 5 years previously. And out of nowhere, this old gentleman asked my brother if he wanted to buy, or at least have, an old Russian samovar that he was looking to get rid of. And this, of course, surprised my brother to no end, and they started talking about it. And it seems that this old gentleman used to store this samovar in the downstairs closet. So what I saw when I astral projected in most probably a lower astral plane was the shadow of this old samovar that had existed there in the physical in the past, which reveals part of the problem when you're trying to gain intelligence of the physical by astral projecting. Because the astral planes, especially the lower ones, have a wide variety of imagery. And some of it looks like a physical plane because there are shadows that are cast from the physical onto the lower astral. I mean, imagine a city with tall buildings and the sun behind them casting shadows onto the pavement. That is very much like what exists in the lower astral. You've got these images that are coming in from the physical, but these images these shadows aren't just from the present in the physical. They can be from the past. They can be from the future. They can be things that never existed in the physical ever, but they were dreamed about with a lot of energy from somebody who was in the physical, such that they took on form in the astral. So, what we're going to talk about today are the astral planes and the subdivisions of the astral plane. And I'm going to talk about 7 of these subplanes. However, please be aware that we're talking in generalizations here. Imagine if an alien came down to visit Earth and he visited each one of the 7 continents: Africa, Antarctica, Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, South America. And he said, I'm going to write a short article saying how people live in Africa, with one example, how people live in Asia, with one example. Now, we know, as residents of this planet, that that would be an extreme simplification. However, that's the best I can do right now, because there are innumerable subplanes in the astral. So we're going to be talking about the 7 major subplanes and what you can see there. And I think you'll find that as we go further and further up in vibration, that things become progressively different from what you might see here on the physical. The 7th, or the lowest subdivision of the astral plane, we've talked about in videos before. This is the plane that is closest to the physical. Here you have people and creatures that are still envious of their physical pleasures. And, you know, they're all the physical pleasures that people typically are addicted to. And the plane takes on a very hellish type of dimension, if you think about it, because these people see women that they're interested in, or men, and they see all these substances that they used to enjoy so much, but they can't touch them. They can't feel that high that they used to be able to feel. So it looks like it's just within reach, but they can't quite get there. An experience that I had with this particular subplane, I used to live in an old apartment building that had once been a factory, and it had closed sometime in the late 40s or 50s. It laid dormant for many decades, and drug abusers would use it to use their substances and to get high, and some of them actually died there from overdoses. And when the modern times came in the 90s and the 2000s, they updated this building, they renovated it, and they turned it into upscale apartments. And it was a nice place to live for a while. But I, on a regular basis, would hear a knock on my door. And this door was this very thick metal door, and it had your usual peephole and what have you. And it would be infuriating because I would go to the door, and the door led to 2 very long hallways. I was kind of at a junction, and I would go to the door and there'd be nobody there. At first I figured I'm hearing things, but it would happen on a regular basis. Then I figured it must be some child that's amused by this. But I remember one time I heard the knock, and I was right by the door, and I opened it up immediately, and there was nobody there. And I'm not saying I mistook this. This was a distinct knock. So I started suspecting that perhaps something was trying to contact me. So the next time I astral projected, instead of flying out the window like I normally would, I explored the area, and I found a young woman who I found out had overdosed in the very room that I was now living in. And she sensed, she had been in essentially a coma, if you will, in the astral, but she had come out of it, and I think she sensed that perhaps I could help her, so she was trying to get my attention. And that physical knock took a lot of energy out of her, which is probably why it would go by a week or 2 in between these knocks, because it took a lot to get my attention on the physical. So I was able to speak with her. She was open at the time because she was actively seeking help, and that's That's the major thing that you need. If you're going to help somebody to leave being stranded on the lower astral, they need to want to be helped. You cannot force someone to move forward if they're not interested in doing so. So I was able to help her discover what had happened and to move on. And she then disappeared and with a smile on her face, and I believe moved on to a better place. But that's the lowest level of the astral, and that's the one we've talked about before in the past. When you astral project, you typically go through this level to start with. The next level, the sixth, is very much like the lowest level. However, you don't have as much interesting people running around as you do in the seventh. Here you might see people who've just passed over and they're being met on this lower plane by their relatives who try to explain to them what has happened and where they go from here. I met my grandmother when she passed. She was on this level, and I was able to find her by thinking about her and concentrating on her. And I was able to let her know that she was a very good woman. Always one of the most. She was Christian, and I'm not really religious today, but she was just such a beautiful woman. Always cared more about others, helping others, and you know, the only reason she was still there was because she was concerned about her family. And I told her, I said, while we were sad that she had passed, that we were fine and we would be fine, and that she could move on with securing the knowledge that we and her family would be just fine. So in the upper level of the upper subdivisions of this subdivision of the sixth, you can even find little cities and villages that are much like today, that souls have concocted to become comfortable with their surroundings in preparation for their eventual moving on. Now, as you go up to the next level, the fifth, things become very different. I remember when I visited the fifth, it appeared like I suddenly was in some sort of a university area. There was everything from, antiseptic laboratories that stretched on for miles to ivy-covered university buildings that you might see in Harvard or perhaps Oxford or other types of Yale, other types of very distinguished universities or laboratories. And I started walking around and exploring, and I met an individual there who seemed to be kind of in charge. And I asked him what the deal was. He said, well, on this level, many people who had intellectual desires that they weren't able to fully accomplish in the physical, they come here and they do work. They create cures. They come up with physical and physics theories, anything that sparks their intelligence and allows them to work. So thinking about this, I immediately thought, wow, is Nikola Tesla here? I really would like to meet him. This was funny because this guy, he kind of laughed. He said, yes, everyone wants to meet Tesla, but he does not like to be disturbed. He's very intent on his work. But if you like, you could meet Thomas Edison. And I said, no thanks. And he laughed. He said, everybody says that. So, it was just kind of interesting. But so I wandered around there a bit longer, and it was just interesting. There was just a lot of people very intent on their inventions and what have you. On the fourth subdimension of the astral plane, I found a wide variety of very interesting vistas. I saw buffalo running. I saw castles, huge halls that looked like Viking type halls. And then I looked upon a Lord of the Rings type of scenario where I saw something that looked very much like Hobbiton, or a place where I might find Bilbo or Frodo from The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And there I found out that this was a level where inhabitants, or even people from older races, or who once enjoyed Earth life that is no longer there, or or didn't exist in the first place, where these groups created these vistas, created these places of existence where they could experience a huge Viking hall, where they prepared for Ragnarok, or where Native Americans could hunt a buffalo as they used to once upon a time. And then evidently people here created this Lord of the Rings type of scenario. I'm just glad I was looking at the Hobbiton rather than I don't know if they went the full way and created Sauron and all the rest of those types of interesting dark type creatures. Who knows? At any rate, this was a very grand dimension here that it was kind of like a slice of the ancient past that entities had created to re-experience this type of life. So I flew around there for a while. When I went to the third subdimension, I heard beautiful, beautiful music. And there was this enormous orchestra that was probably 10,000 musicians large, playing this symphony that was just amazing. Now, I didn't hear it with my ears because I didn't have physical ears, but it soaked through my entire body. The vibrations that went through my body, I just was able to interpret as this unearthly music. There I found out that great musicians, artists, very creative people would dwell on this dimension. And for another thing that I saw was the sky. There was a portion of the sky that was many, many, many miles or many, many kilometers long, and there were people, thousands of them, painting, in essence, what would be, say, a Renaissance type painting. They started with the Bible story of Adam and Eve, and they went all the way to the book of Revelations. And every single story that was featured in the Christian Bible was being painted in enormous size in the sky. So what you had here was this enormous portion of the sky, which was a painting. And it was just amazing. You couldn't do something like this in the physical, but in the astral you could. So it allowed these musicians, it allowed these artists to take their artistic abilities to the nth degree. And it was a marvelous thing that I will never forget. Going up to the second subdimension, things took on a very solemn feeling. I found there chapels. One particular chapel made the Sistine Chapel in Rome look like a miniature. It was enormous. It was probably hundreds of miles or kilometers long, and I could barely see the top of the building. The columns were perfect and lovely and seemed to go on forever. And there were many people there who were, some were worshiping, some were walking about and exploring. I went to other places where there was Hindu type temples, and I saw enormous mosques. I found out there that this is a level where all the various religions of Earth and even religions from elsewhere are recreated, and people who are interested can experience the vibrational level that is associated with the pure expression of these religions. I'm not talking about the material corruption that happened to them here on the physical plane. I'm talking about the pure truths that existed in these various religions. They're there, unfiltered, and pure in a way that can be experienced perhaps in a way that they could not in our corrupt physical plane. Now, in the highest dimension of the astral plane, um, there were teachers everywhere. Some were in typical classrooms, but many were sitting under trees or in park areas or temples, anywhere you think someone might be comfortable instructing. And you would typically have these teachers talking about a wide variety of topics with their students listening and asking questions. I wondered about just trying to listen in a little bit here and a little bit there. I recall there was a lot of different subjects. Not all of them I understood or even remember today. A couple of them that were perhaps dumbed down enough that I could understand. One was talking about how parallel universes affect one another. Another subject, which I did listen to a little bit, was the question, which is more important, learning to truly love or wisdom? And that was being talked about and discussed and debated. And I just sat there for a while and just kind of listened in, and it was quite the interesting debate. So, these are my experiences in visiting these various major subdimensions of the astral plane. Like as I said before, keep in mind that there are innumerable subdivisions of the astral plane. I gave you the best generic examples of my experiences as I can give you. Your mileage may vary should you visit these planes, and I'd certainly like to hear from you. If you do experience something else that would be of interest. That is this week's video. If you liked it, please hit the like button. If it's something that you think someone else might benefit from, please share. If you have not gotten around to subscribing, please do so. And hit the subscribe button and also hit that bell, because if you hit the bell, then you'll be notified every time there is a new video. I continue to like and respond to your questions and comments. I think I am the single luckiest guy on YouTube because I have the single best club members who write intelligent questions and comments that I always appreciate. So please continue to do that. If you want to check out the description area, it shows you a link to the website for Astral Club and also the link to Patreon if that's something you wish to support. That is the video for this week. And as always, I'm Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.